You're listening to Surviving and Thriving with Renisha, a podcast about life, mental health, and personal growth. Here I talk about my journey living with borderline personality disorder, depression, and anxiety, and how I'm learning to love myself despite it. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Renisha. I go by Rennie, Riri to some, and I am the host of Surviving and Thriving podcast. Welcome to 2025. I know that this year has already been off to such a wild, scary, hectic time for many. There's so much going on. For those of you who are new here, I'm based in Southern California. There's a lot of devastation currently happening in LA. There are people who I know who are directly impacted. And there's just a lot going on beyond just California, just globally, across the country, across the world. There's been a lot of energies, a lot happening. And it's very much a challenging and testing time for many. And so I wanted to start this year off in this podcast in the direction I'm going differently because just intuitively I know that it's a challenging year and it's going to be a challenging year. And that doesn't mean it can't be a good year, but it is a challenging year. And I want to acknowledge where many are at right now. I want to start by actually pulling an oracle card. And for those of you who don't believe or you're not open to this type of content or messaging, that's completely understandable and completely fine. But I always find it helpful for myself to just kind of get these types of messages from spirit. So I'm going to pull one to start this podcast off, and then I'm going to jump into the topic of today, which is about ways to stay grounded during times of challenge, which is something that I feel like is a topic that really needs to be discussed right now, considering the current circumstances, but also it's something that I feel like we can come back to and think about whenever we're experiencing any type of challenge in life. And it's something that I've had to learn over the course of my life from a lot of the challenges that I've had, especially throughout my journey of healing and working through childhood trauma, healing from very severe mental illnesses and grief and so forth. So yeah. So the message that I pulled for today is soul family. It says, call in your tribe. You don't have to do it alone. And the deck that I'm using for those who are interested is Rebecca Campbell's Work Your Light Oracle card deck, which I love. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful deck. I will have this on video, so you guys should be able to see it if you're on Spotify, and I'll upload this to YouTube as well. But calling your tribe, you do not have to do it alone. And I think that this is incredibly relevant considering I really feel intuitively a huge shift in focus on community this year. And that's really an area I started to feel more drawn to throughout last year. And I feel like a lot of my healing work has kind of shifted from just self-discovery to community. And especially in times of crisis, community is so incredibly crucial. So let's go ahead and dive into the topic. How to stay grounded in times of crisis, in times of, transition, in challenging times. It is a very difficult time right now for so many people. And, I can't understand what it's like to be in a situation to have lost every single thing. All I can do is pull from my own wisdom and experience from navigating a very challenging upbringing and a lot of dysfunction. There were many times where I had to leave home. I ran away a lot. I have been briefly in others' homes throughout my childhood, and having to kind of transition and readjust and never feeling like I was on stable grounding at times was really challenging. And it definitely, I think, impacted my mental health. And so a lot of the issues that I had been healing through and working through was just really a result of a lot of that dysfunction and instability. And if there's a couple of things that I definitely learned throughout a lot of these healing experiences that I hope will carry us all collectively through the challenges of this year, it's first and foremost staying present. When people say that, that does not mean ignoring reality, okay? I often see a lot of content around, wanting to be positive and wanting to keep the mood and the tone and the energy light. But I personally I don't really resonate with toxic positivity. I don't really resonate with the idea that you can't have both. You can't be aware and also be present and also be grateful. I think these things can coexist. And especially when you're going through challenging times, I think the first thing that you can do for yourself is to be honest about how you're feeling and how these experiences are impacting you. If you're someone who are experiencing loss in any form, acknowledging the grief instead of trying to push that feeling away and trying to cover it up with this insincere sense of happiness because you feel pressured to show up and be happy or be resilient or be strong. It's completely okay to feel how you feel. It's human. We are human. And so I always want to encourage us before we even get deeper into, what we're about to talk about, what we're talking about, to sit with whatever is coming up for us right now and whatever state you're in, whatever um, country or place, wherever you are in the world, whatever you're experiencing right now, whether you are someone who is directly impacted by what's happening here in California, whether you are someone on the other side of the country impacted by other things, a different part of the world, wherever you're listening from, wherever you are, I want you to take a moment to sit, if you can, and acknowledge how you're feeling right now. Whatever it is, without judgment, if it's fear, if it's anxiety, if it's grief, if it's sadness, if it's anger, if it's frustration, if it's gratitude, whatever's coming up for you, sit with that and acknowledge that, because I think part of being grounded and being present is acknowledging how we feel, whatever those feelings are. Because at the end of the day, your feelings are communicating something to you. And I personally am not someone that subscribes to the belief that an emotion is positive or negative. I think that emotions are simply there to communicate a need to you or a desire, whatever it may be. It's there to communicate something to you about yourself, about whatever it is that you might be experiencing or thinking or so forth. And so learning to acknowledge it without judgment and allow it to just flow through, it's so beneficial as we try to stabilize and ground ourselves into this year. And so once you are able to acknowledge your emotions, I would completely recommend and intuitively feel called to encourage all of us to find groundedness and mindfulness. And so what I mean by that is to be more consciously aware of what's happening in your immediate surrounding. And I completely recognize that for everyone, this is going to look completely different. Some people are not in environments that feel safe or that feel peaceful at this time. And so I want to acknowledge that. And if that is you, then I'm going to go over some other ways that we can be stabilizing our energy, that also calls in support from others, that also allows for us to um, extend our support beyond the things that we can see. And especially if you're someone who is a spiritual person or someone who is a believer, whether you are or not, I think there are ways that we can shift our mind and our perspective in a way to where we can see hope in things, right? So I'll get to that in a bit. But for those of you who do feel comfortable in the environments that you're in, I would encourage you to very much hyper focus on what it is that you're surrounded by, what it is that you're feeling. One practice that I've done throughout my recovery is the 5-4-3-2-1 practice, which we learn to just focus on like 5 things we can see and 4 things we can like smell. I forget the exact order every single time, but look at your surroundings, what's immediately around you, who is around you, what smells, what sounds do you see, and focus on that. That can be a really good way to get out of our minds, especially if we feel like we're in a place where our minds are just so overwhelmed with burden, with stress, with anxiety, with fear, with whatever's coming up for you. If you feel like you are overwhelmed internally, it can be really hard. And I am a neurodivergent person, so my brain is always going. But even if it is me practicing redirecting my thoughts to like just hand, 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 just hand, even if it's for 2 seconds, or, you know, whatever I see over here, the color pink, the color blue, even if it's just for 2 seconds, this is not a competition. This is whatever you can do to get out of here, because this can be a place of extended turmoil when there's already so much happening in the world, and especially in our modern culture where we are being constantly bombarded with information. We have to learn to quiet it at times. Not all the time. Again, it's good to be informed, but we have to learn to silence and go inside, or be present and be grounded in what's happening right around us, right? And that's something that I've been actively working on for years. It's been a really big part of my own healing journey. Um, and so I 100% recommend some techniques that you can do, some grounding techniques. I do breath work. So even if it's just like consciously taking deep breaths, there's some really good breath work meditations on YouTube, all free. Like, I love YouTube for that reason, because there are a lot of healing practices that you can do to help you get grounded. If you are in a place where you can do something that's more active, you can do yoga. If you aren't someone who feels comfortable doing kind of like a traditional sitting meditation, I want to express that meditation looks different for anyone. It can be active. It can really be whatever you make it, to be honest. It doesn't always look the same for everyone. I know everyone kind of thinks sitting a specific way on the floor with your eyes closed and thinking of nothing. I personally am not someone who ever thinks of nothing. So that's going to look different for everyone. There are still ways for you to get that stillness, even if it's going outside and focusing on, whatever you see at the park, birds, trees, people watching. That's a really great exercise that I try to do. Um, so whatever resonates for you, whatever's coming up for you, like, oh, this is something I think I could do to kind of quiet my mind or find that stillness, I encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to, if you can, make this a regular part of your daily practice throughout this year, in times when things get rocky or challenging, or there are periods of transition or collective fear, or just these big world events happening, or, things that are outside of our control, right? This is some way for us to come back to ourselves. One other thing, and I kind of touched on this already, but part of grounding is also just connecting with your body. For those of you who might be new here, I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And one thing that I struggled with is I also have complex trauma. So one things that I've really struggled with is disassociation. I, like, a while ago when I was like doing YouTube back in the day, I made like a short film about what it's like to live with disassociation, but it very much feels like an outer body experience. And I realized, especially in the past couple of years of doing this intentional healing work, that I feel very disconnected from my body. And I think, there's so many factors, me being neurodivergent, having trauma, like there's so many reasons why I feel disconnected from my body now. Um, and meditation and grounding practices and movement practices have been really key for me to feel that reconnection. To me, it ties into meditation. I do more of like moving meditations, because movement helps me get out of my head and also connect with my body. So kind of killing two birds with one stone. I kind of hate that phrase now. So I'm trying to think of a different one, but you kind of get what I'm saying. So you can try whatever movement resonates with you. I personally like to dance. So lately I've been exploring kind of like dancing meditation, like free flowing dance movements. Those of you who know me know I love K-pop. So I do a lot of K-pop choreo, yoga and Pilates. I've been doing a lot of at-home workouts, yoga, mat Pilates. But even just going for walks outside, if you are in a place where you can do things like this. And again, I know a lot of these things are like status quo. You've heard these a million times, but I can't stress enough how going back to basics and exploring these simple things and adding these simple practices to our regimen truly can make a difference. One other thing I would recommend is community. If you are someone who's like going through a challenging experience that's outside of your control, if you're someone who's directly impacted by the things happening in the world right now, whether it is the natural disasters or any type of political upheaval or whatever it may be, community. I have been so called in the past year to reconnect with people, and I'm an introvert, and I'm also someone who has historically really struggled with trusting others because of my own traumas, and it's something I've been actively working to heal. I've definitely like had a lot of like friendship breakups and mishaps in the past year, and I've been like so frustrated with people, but at the same time I have been proven time and time again that good people do exist. And I'm going to get to this shortly when I talk a little bit about like perspective and mindset and all of those things, how we can look towards other perspectives that could be healing or helpful for us in specific challenging times of our lives. But I want to stress that we are not biologically wired or designed to survive life alone. And I think the more that we realize that we truly are genuinely all connected, I was just talking to my husband about this actually, but we are like ants, right? We don't recognize it, but we are. If if there was an ant that was just alone in the world, I don't think that ant would survive very long, right? Like you have to be in a colony. You have to be together. We have family units, we have partners, we have friends. We are naturally inclined to connect, right? But we live in a society that is so hyper individualistic, and I do think that we are on in the beginning stages of moving out of that. And I do hope to throughout this year explore more content that is more spiritually attuned and coming from my intuition, because I feel like I've been getting a lot of downloads and messages about this. But we are recognizing just how important community and authentic connections are. I think that this year in particular and the challenges that it brings and it's already bringing is really going to reinforce the fact that we need to come together. We need to heal through whatever, these false illusions of division, that we've been programmed to believe. We need to release that, because to survive, we need each other. That's just the truth. We need each other. We have to come together. We have to help one another. And so I encourage you on whatever side of it is, whether it is asking for help and seeking support, because just doing that could be hard, or whether it's you getting involved in community and being the one that's providing support. I encourage you to do so. I'm actually going to be releasing a newsletter on my Substack with a compilation of resources for those who are directly impacted by the wildfires happening right now. And I think I've mentioned in the past, if you are someone who's listened to this podcast before, that I freelance and I work with a nonprofit. So I'm hoping that I can support in whatever way that I can. And I just encourage others to find ways to be actively involved, whether that be planning and creating events or spaces for people to come together, whether that be sharing resources of spaces that already exist, whether that be donating, whether that be getting involved with nonprofits or community efforts, wherever you are with whatever's going on, or just educating yourself on what's happening around you in your local community. I think that that is going to be so key to staying grounded throughout this year. Um, and and to also kind of bridging this into my next topic, to shift your mindset about people, right? And what I mean by that is I'm seeing a lot of rhetoric, and I've definitely fallen guilty to falling into this belief that everything is all bad. I'm seeing a lot of very doom type messaging, which I completely understand, because for the past 4 years, especially, the world definitely has been and seems like and very much has been a scary place for many. There are very real threats in this world politically, socially, financially, in so many ways. I understand, so I don't want to at all feel like or come across as if I'm being dismissive, because I am directly impacted by some of these things. So absolutely not where I'm coming from. But what I do want to say is that we aren't inviting nuance as much as we could in our modern society. We're only looking at the bad. We're only looking at the bad. And even in situations like this that are so heartbreaking for so many people, I promise you, there are good people. There are people out there who are helping. There are people out there who are, they've dropped everything to get involved and to do what they can. And wherever you are in the world, when something happens, there will always be scary, terrible things and, new truths to uncover, which is not really a fun process. But on the flip side of that will also always be a helper. Find those people, find those helpers, find those good people, because that's going to give you more hope. And I feel like it's going to be very difficult for us to get through this season of life and this year without hope. And in order to have hope, we have to force ourselves to see some good in situations, and that can be really hard. And again, I don't mean this to be dismissive. You can do both. You can acknowledge where things are wrong and where things need to be changed. And this is what's happening collectively, is us acknowledging these very, inconvenient truths in the world and things we need to be shifting. But also on the flip side of that, you can also acknowledge the good people, the people who are change makers, the people who are actively involved in trying to make this world a better place, the people who are helping people rebuild and doing what they can to support and trying to be a light in this dark world. You can also focus on that. You can do both. And I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to seek out resources and support and community and find those good people. They are out there, even when it feels like that's not the case, even when all you're seeing and consuming is just darkness. And that also kind of segues me into the next topic, is to be very, very, very mindful of what you're feeding your soul, your spirit, your mind. Like, what are you consuming? And I'm not just talking about food, which is also important, but what are you consuming on a daily basis? How many hours are you sitting on your phone doom scrolling? What type of messages are you allowing yourself to penetrate your brain? Like, what's sticking in your mind? What is keeping you up at night? And again, there are ways to be informed without, you know, sacrificing your peace to that extent, to where now you become filled with fear and you're destabilized, and you're in a position now where you feel like you can't really contribute in any meaningful way because you're grappled with grief and fear. And I find myself in that predicament very often, because I'm someone who really likes to be informed. I also work in media relations. I have to read the news often. And so intuitively, I've been feeling really called to take a step back and reduce my screen time and be really mindful of what I consume. And it's actually really hard for me, because I'm someone who, I need to know what's going on. I'm a planner. I'm very type A, and I can't make plans unless I know every detail. But, and you might not resonate this depending on your beliefs, but for me, something that's come up for me as I've been really like meditating and praying and connecting with spirit is the need to trust. For me, again, I consider myself a spiritual person, a spiritual person, not a religious person, but a spiritual person. I do look to higher sources, higher versions of myself as well, to get me through challenging times. And in times like this, I have to trust. I have to trust, because we won't always see in our immediate present predicament the things that make us feel hopeful, especially in challenging times like this. And so in those moments, I have no choice but to trust. And so I've been really practicing that. And one thing that I've been actively doing to just keep myself optimistic and hopeful when I'm starting to feel hopeless, and I struggle with depression. So I have to be really careful about what I consume online for that reason. But one thing that I did this week, for example, I was kind of scrolling through and seeing what was happening with the fires and just feeling very overwhelmed by it all. And I, was trying to think, what can I do? It's hard to sit and watch these things, right, and feel like we have no sense of autonomy or there's nothing we can really do. And so I actually just felt called to take a step back and pause from it for a bit. And I did. And then when I went back to my phone, I decided to look up like good deeds. And I spent probably like 30 minutes, 45 minutes or so just watching really sweet, wholesome good deeds online. And, we see these things and we see people comment things like, oh, my faith in humanity is restored. And that's the power of being mindful of what we're consuming, right? Like it does impact us. It does impact how we think, our beliefs, our fears, our how we move through the world. If we don't feel safe, right? If we don't feel safe, if we're afraid of each other, if we're afraid of each other's beliefs, if we're fighting and all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, it's really hard to have hope. And I'm someone who believes that humanity requires hope to get through challenging times. So what are some ways that you can find hope, whether it be through conversations with loving people in your life, friends, family that like motivate and inspire and uplift you, whether it be like your favorite podcast or content or YouTube or whatever you can find that you feel like actually uplifts your spirit and gives you some type of motivation or inspiration or hope, whether it be something that you yourself can create or do. It can be something you make with your hands, or it can be just going outside. It could be, listening to a specific song or music. It could be going into a specific community. There are ways for us to shift that. Today, as I was going through my podcast that I listen to news podcasts on occasion to stay informed, and I find it better for me to listen to it than to watch it. I just the images of devastation and too many of those images. Again, while it's good to be informed and it is a privilege to not, have to see these things, I recognize that. But too much of that for me, especially as someone who is healing and struggling with my mental health already, is detrimental. So I will listen to podcasts on occasion that kind of give a summary of what's going on, and I find that helpful. But today I decided to actually listen to Five Good Things from CNN. They do like a lot of roundups of things, and I was listening to the good news that they were sharing, and they were just sharing like about some good Samaritans and people who have been helping. I think there was like a story about someone who saved his and a bunch of his neighbors' home, rescued this neurodivergent man who didn't understand what was happening in the fires, trying to escape a car, was trying to escape in a car that was on fire, and this man saved him. Stories like that, like, it moves me to tears, because when we're online and we're seeing people make terrible comments and we're seeing people fight back and forth, and especially right now in America, there's so much, division and turmoil. There's so much hatred and vitriol being spewed right now. And I find myself getting just so angry, and I don't want to add to that. I don't want to add to that collective anger. And so I had to take a step back and see where I can shift, out of that energy, because I want to do something that helps. And so this is just some ways that has been helpful for me, like digesting content about people who are doing good deeds and looking into community resources and things that are being created to help people, and reminding myself that there are people out in the world who want to help. And I'm so sorry, I'm struggling to articulate myself again. I'm neurodivergent and I am overwhelmed right now by everything happening collectively. I tend to stay to myself during these times. And I actually remember coming across a post recently from like a man who had autism, just sharing how tough this time is for neurodivergent people, because those of us who do have like pattern recognition skills, we can like see clearly from a larger level what's going on in the world, and it's scary. And I think I briefly was allowing myself to spiral because of it, because I was seeing so many like things that are happening in US politics that are similar, like correlating with past events. And if you know, you know exactly what I mean when I say that. And I am a neurodivergent woman of color. So some of these things directly do impact me and my family. And rightfully so, I have been anxious. But at the same time, on a deeper level, I intuitively know that when we do come together, when we are proactive in, shifting our mindset, we are powerful. We are powerful. We really are. And it takes us being reminded of that. And there have been so many messages and things that have convinced us that that's not true, and convinced us that our power lies in external forces and people outside of us and our leaders and this and that. And I think we're in a season of life where a lot of really terrible truths are surfacing and these illusions are falling. And as people start to learn the truth about things, there is a lot of collective stress and fear and anxiety and anger and frustration, rightfully so. But with that, I just want to remind people too of our own power, right? When we get the determination to do things and when we can actually come together, we can do great things. And I know it sounds so cliche, but it's true. It's true. So I don't think I have like the perfect words to say for this moment, but I just really deeply encourage you to look for the helpers, look for opportunities for healing, look for community, seek out those good stories, seek out content and things and people and places that inspire you and bring you hope, especially right now when it's needed. Because that shift in energy, that shift in your mindset, it has a ripple effect. It does. Like when I was struggling the most and, just sitting with people and hearing them share stories about how they overcame difficult times and how they were able to rebuild parts of their lives that they felt like were destroyed forever. Those types of stories got me through some of the hardest times of my life. And so I just don't want people to underestimate the importance of seeking out inspiration and hope during this time. It's not to be, dismissive of the terrible things happening in the world, but it's coming from this desire to pour more good into the world. And it's really difficult to do that if we do succumb to all of the fear and the doom that we're seeing. So many people are struggling and they need support. And for me personally, I can't show up if I'm destabilized, if I'm dysregulated, if I myself am just like grappling with my own like depression, and I can't show up like that. And so I am taking personal responsibility for my energy, for my mindset, for my thoughts, and for what I allow into my mind, into my spirit. And so I just really encourage you all to do that. Again, I'm going to be sharing some resources in my newsletter. I will include some resources that I think will help with boosting hope in our communities. And I do genuinely hope it's helpful. If this podcast is just like you're not in a place to hear this right now, I completely understand. Um, and I'm just sending so much love to anyone who comes across this out into the collective. And yeah, I will be moving forward, planning to bring more people on who are doing good work in the world. I know I've been talking about that for a while, so I appreciate you all like being patient and just bearing with me, because again, a lot of the things that's been happening like since I started this podcast has just been like you never know what's going to happen. You never can like prepare for things like this and like some of the previous things that I personally have gone through. So thank you all for being so patient and understanding. And I do hope that this is somewhat helpful for those of you who've listened up until now. And yeah, I'm going to end it here. But I encourage you to connect with me. I am at Just Riri Shop on Instagram and TikTok. I don't know how long TikTok will be around. Oh. And I also have a Substack, and all of those things will be linked in my show notes. I'll also be sharing those resources that I mentioned. And I encourage you to, if you're aware of resources or if you're actively involved in any type of efforts to support those impacted by the wildfires, please also feel free to like reach out on social media and share those. And I would love to add that as well to any of my like newsletter roundups and things that are coming soon. So yeah, I love you all. Thank you so much. Till next time. Bye.